In this 45 liter backpack is my ultralight winter setup. It includes a hot tent as well as a bunch of other gear that we're gonna be covering in this video. Now, right now, I wanna go over the good, the bad, and the ugly of every piece of gear that I brought, as well as talk about one piece of gear that I'm never bringing again. Some of you might not know this trip, so you can check the link down below to see it, but the temperatures got 41 degrees below freezing, so it was nice and cold. Regardless, I love winter backpacking, and as long as you know your gear really well, it can be a great time. So let's cover the gear, and hopefully you can take some value out of this. And by the way, if you want links to any of these items, check the description down below. We'll link as many of them as possible. All right, so this is most of my gear here on the table. I've got a few other items that we'll get to at the end, but I'm gonna start on this side and go through first what I was wearing as I got into the area. So obviously I had some boots on. These are some Under Armour insulated boots. Honestly, I don't recommend these. They're just a pair that I have. These could definitely be lighter weight, but they are very, very warm, which I do like. These are some Cascade design poles. The only reason I took these is I didn't have any KotaUL snow baskets. I'm a big KotaUL fan, I like those, but these have the snow baskets, so I needed to get these. These are just really some cheap poles that you can get just about anywhere anymore. I had some Easton Snow Shoes. They worked really, really well. I liked those. And then as far as what I was wearing, so obviously we've got to have the hats. You've probably seen me in this hat a couple of times, so I've obviously got a couple hats. Sunglasses are really critical when you're out in the snow, so made sure that I had those. I had some wool socks. I'm typically a darn tough or thereabouts type of sock guy. This is the Satu Pants, so I had those on, and for base layers, on my bottom half, I had Dragonwool Underwear, I had Dragonwool Bottoms, and then I had the Satu Pants. Had some other base layer bottoms that I'll cover here in a second as well. On the top half of me, I actually was using this polyester sun shirt. I like to hike in one base layer and typically switch if I think I'm gonna get sweaty. I really like this one because it is absolutely tiny. It's gonna dry really, really fast, even if it's not on my body. So I hike in with this and then I switch to something else once I get to camp. And then I was hiking in the Ventus, and that was a phenomenal piece. For that time of year, the Ventus is just ideal for hiking in. Cuts the wind, insulates you, but breathes really well. Obviously, this is all pretty ultralight gear. The setup in its entirety with some extra pieces that I didn't need, kind of rush packed, honestly. It was 18 pounds as the base weight, but I put that all in a 45 liter pack. So it's my 45 liter pack, and that worked really, really well. I didn't have any, and one thing to note too is like the next morning, I actually got my entire shelter in just one side and the saw. So that's really useful. I was using these differently, and you might see that in some of the footage, but that worked out just fine. And really, it's 45 liter pack, most people are packing in like 75 to 100 liter packs, so you can really get away with something smaller, which is ideal when you're climbing hills and you're trekking through snow because it's just heavy, it's hard to move, and it makes a massive difference to be able to be ultralight. As far as the water containers, I did have a smart water bottle and an Nalgene. I took an Nalgene on this one, I don't typically, so that I could put hot water in here and shove it in the bottom of my bag, which is exactly what I did. I had some camera equipment. Some of it is you're getting filmed on right now, but I also had a tripod. I was using my phone, GoPro, a few things with this tripod. So this is a slick carbon fiber tripod. Works really well. So that's kind of like going from the outside of my pack now. Those are all things that are on the outside. In my hip belt pocket, I had my headlamp. This is a Nightcore NU25, I believe. I had my Gerber Dime, which is just a little multi-tool that I really like to have with me. Had my TP. I typically like to take my Garmin and have it on the outside of my bag or in my hip belt pockets where it's really easy to access. I had a battery bank, and then actually I had all of my food in my hip belt pockets except for my like freeze-dried meal. So I was able to stuff that all in there and grab as I went, which is good because I got really hungry on the hike in. For this particular trip, I actually switched to a Toaks 700 milliliter pot. I usually am a 550 kind of guy, and this is a piece that I would probably just stick with the 550. The reason I switched is because I thought I'd be melting a little bit of snow, and a bigger capacity would help with that. I know guys don't typically melt snow in the titanium. I sometimes do, and it's quiet. I sometimes do, just have to be more careful with it, but I ended up not melting snow, and it doesn't have the hash marks in it like the 550, so I'm still more of a 550 kind of guy. I got my Toaks long-handled polishable spoon, and then this was a critical piece. So this is Pyro Putty. This is one that we do, and it's a blend just for us. This is something I typically leave in my like little safety dot bag that I've got here for first aid, but this was critical for starting the fire, starting the stove over and over again. Makes it way easier, and as you can see, I've done that on I think 2 trips now, and I've still got a little bit left in there, but it's really nice because you can just take out what you need. You don't have like a pre-designated size of the fire starter, just take out what you need to use it. But that was super critical as it got a little bit more sketchy and I needed to get that fire going, or in the morning when I needed to restart it. This is my first aid bag. I'm not gonna take you through all of this, but I will point out one thing that was really critical to have, and that was this cordage. I ended up having to use that on my tent to secure it, so that was big. Some of this stuff is getting X. Like I said, there's an item at the end that I will not be taking again. Just done with that piece, and we'll be trading that out for sure. But a lot of this stuff too, like I'll probably use this again. It just wasn't my favorite. Getting into the clothing side, I packed all of my clothing first off in this stuff sack. I had 2 of these stuff sacks. I'll cover the other one in a second. This is actually the accessory that goes with the KotaULs. Just a 30 denier sil nylon, so watertight, which was really helpful, but just a really, really lightweight one. So this right here is the NovaPro. I feel like this piece literally saved my life. As I was setting up camp, the wind was blowing like crazy. I was getting really cold and just kind of frantic, and I threw that piece on. And because this fabric doesn't have those stitch holes in it, it cuts the wind way, way better than your typical puffy. And so it cut the wind, heated up, and that was super helpful. Over here is additional base layers. So once I got to camp, I switched to a Dragonwool hoodie. More on the reasoning why I do that is just that the Dragonwool hoodie has wool next to skin, which it's going to give you a warmer feel and keep you warmer. Still, it's going to manage your moisture, and so I just like to have this on at camp, and then I hiked out in it the next morning as well, and it was great for that. But it just does such a good job at managing moisture, but also feeling really warm next to skin. I like sleeping in this and being in it around camp especially. I will hike in this, no problem too. But if I'm bringing in 2 base layers, this is gonna be a little bit heavier than that sun shirt, so I don't need 2 of these just to save a little bit of weight. Now these, I don't even know how to say the name of this company. Brynje, I think they're a Norwegian company, but these are literally fishnets. These are an additional base layer that I used underneath my Dragonwool base layers once I got to camp. But the netting on this is just really, really good for trapping air, but also as you're moving around, it breathes. So it's really breathable. And then when you stop, it's really good at trapping air. So these worked out pretty well. And I did like them. I'm sure I'll use them again, especially in conjunction with the Dragonwool. It was great. Rain jacket is just a really, really lightweight shell, so I didn't end up using this, but I like to have something like that, whether it's to block the wind or if you're in some kind of situation where you need moisture protection. These are down pants. These are actually, I don't know what model I bought these years and years ago, but they're from a company called Kuiu, and they're just really nice down pants that I can use to insulate. Now, one of the reasons I like to have these is if it gets too cold at night, I can sleep in them, which adds quite a bit of temperature boost. I can't even talk. If I'm sleeping in these things, they're gonna make me warmer, right? So I like to have these. These are kind of like my safety net, and so I can sleep in them, or if just around camp if I'm super cold, I can throw those on over the top of my pants, which works out really well. On the glove side, this is also from Kuiu. This is just a pair of synthetic gloves. I didn't love them. I actually ended up wearing what I call my sticky bandit gloves. If you know, you know. It's Christmas time anyways. But so fingerless gloves, I ended up using these the most because I could still have some dexterity and then slide my hands in and out of the thicker gloves, which I'll show you here in a second. But yeah, I like the fingerless gloves quite a bit, but a good pair of just synthetic gloves like this where you got pretty good dexterity are also critical. I like to have synthetic though, so that they can just dry really fast. These are merino wool. Just know if you're using merino wool, it is warm next to skin, but if it gets wet, it's not gonna dry as fast as those synthetics. Honestly, this was an area where I made a mistake. I didn't realize that I had these ones packed. So that was extra weight in my pack for the first half of the trip. And then I switched and started using them, ended up using them more than the other gloves. So these are another glove from KotaUL. What I like about these though is they do have a membrane. They have synthetic insulation in them, so they're really water resistant. But also with these ones, they have this leather interior. And anytime you're working with a titanium stove or any stove in general, you really should have a pair of leather gloves. These work for me, but you can also go with a full working leather glove. But these worked really, really good on the trail. For sleep system, starting with sleep system, this isn't my entire sleep system, obviously, but I did bring an extra pair of wool Darn Tough socks. These are really lightweight ones, and that's just so if my feet were wet, I could switch into these and get a warm fabric next to my skin and then put on my down booties. I think that anytime you're going out in late season, these are just critical to have. After having frostbite a couple of times in my toes, I'm a big believer in having those available and around. So try a pair of socks just in case. I actually didn't end up using those. I put my other socks straight inside of these because they weren't super wet and they were damp, but they dried out way fast and I didn't end up needing them. And then I have a LoftTek hybrid balaclava as well that I slept in, and a stuff bag. I actually can get all three of those pieces in a single stuff bag. So that's something to know, it just compresses down a little bit. All right, so now let's talk about sleep and shelter systems, and we'll get to the piece that I am done using going forward. So starting on this side, I was actually using a -15 Summit bag. This was a regular because I was testing something a little bit new. Didn't fit in it great. I kind of mentioned that in the video, which is why that LoftTek Balaclava was critical. This was the bag I was using to stuff it and compress it, so it was inside of there. For my sleeping pad, now in the winter, I like to layer pads. You basically have to, unless you have a pad that's like 6 R value. So this is the NeoAir. It's a 4 and change R value pad. So I was using that, and I also had the Nemo Switchback for supplemental warmth. This is also really nice sitting on in the tent, moving around, kind of doubling it up, and it worked really well. I had an Outer Vitals pillow, and that was most of my sleep system. Moving over here to shelter system. So this right here is a Seek Outside U-turn stove. I believe this is the large size. It comes in at about 2 pounds, but it's just absolutely critical for this time of year, doing that type of stuff. It makes it just so much more enjoyable. I say critical, but really I should say critical, highly important, and makes it a lot more fun. Altogether, this weighs right in around 2 pounds, which is pretty dang amazing. When I'm going out with that, I like to have something to cut firewood with. So this is just a Gerber Saw. I typically just take one blade, and that is frozen shut, but you can kind of see what that looks like. This is probably the lightest weight item I can find to cut wood. I don't want to bring a full hatchet, but I really, really like this piece. Moving on to the shelter here, this was actually just a footprint I threw in because the shelter is floorless. You could definitely get lighter with a piece of Tyvek or something else that doesn't have some of these extra danglies, but that worked just fine. Here's my stakes, and then this is the shelter. So this shelter is the piece, we finally made it there, is the piece that I am not taking again. I'm done with it. I tried it, I set it up in my backyard, and I couldn't get it to pitch the way that I wanted it to very well. And then up on the mountain, same deal. I couldn't get the bottom 4 inches of the zipper to ever close. It wasn't pitching very well. Shame on me, I could have used a few more stakes. So that was on me. I kind of had to figure out some alternatives on the mountain. It would have helped a little bit, but really the issues that I had with this were not my favorite. The other thing was, when you're using a titanium stove like this, it's really nice to have it central in the shelter instead of on the far end, because then the opposite far end is still cold and frozen. Anyway, so this piece, I'm done with it. I've already ordered a replacement. But there are some pretty big takeaways I wanted to talk about with this that you can apply when you're going to buy gear. And that really is, you need to look at it 2 ways. When you're buying a piece of gear, I think it's really important that you, one, either know the company and have trust in them. You see reviews on the company, know that they're going to sell you a solid product. This piece right here felt like it just wasn't polished and finished. just couldn't get the pitch right? So there's just little angles here and there that made a big difference. And at one point, because I couldn't get it to pitch as low and still taut as I wanted, I went back in my shelter and all my stuff was covered in snow because the wind was blowing snow underneath the sides of this thing. And so it just wasn't finished and polished, which bugged me. So if you're not gonna buy from a company, let's say that has a really good reputation, then I do think you need to do some deep analysis on the product itself, read the reviews, make sure people are very happy with it, the pros and cons. I probably rushed this purchase. I didn't read the reviews that well, and it's a newer company. So yeah, I'm gonna get rid of this. Maybe if you're interested, let us know in the comments. And yeah, give you a smoking deal. A smoking deal on this piece right here. I've ordered a replacement from probably the biggest experts in the industry, same people that make this stove, and you're gonna see that in the next video that we do. So that should be coming, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you wanna see me go back out and do this all over again with a different shelter and just a totally different scenario. So if you have found some value in this, if you think it's fun, make sure you are subscribed so you can also see that next video. Also, if you haven't watched the trip where I'm actually using all this gear, where it gets 41 degrees below freezing, go check that out because it is a pretty fun one. And if you can't get enough of this trip right here, go check out a deep dive I did over on our Live Ultralight podcast. You can find that on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting app. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys on the next one.